Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody. You wanna be like me, but you can't.
Hey, welcome everybody to Youth Worker on Fire. This is Doug Edwards again, and I've invited Russ Ewell to be a part of us. I'm going to tell you a bit about his ministry, and we're just kind of giving you some upfront stuff about that and about special resource ministry through his church. But here's what I found out about him. While many churches desire to serve children, teens, and adults with special needs and their families, only 29% of the churches offer classes or events specifically for people with disabilities. Russ and Gail Ewell, parents of 2 children with special needs, have been leading in ministry together at Bay Area Christian Church for the last 3 decades. They've developed BACC's inclusive ministry and created esports and e-life inclusive community programs, enabling kids with special needs to participate in sports and activities alongside their peers without disabilities. So Russ and Gail recognize that many churches are unsure how to effectively establish a ministry like this and want to equip them to create inclusive ministries designed for people with disabilities. That's why BACC, which is their church, just launched a free special needs ministry manual. I've looked over this, guys. It is very exceptional. It's great. I think it's something that you can use. And that manual offers churches a step-by-step approach to start or grow this type of ministry. Now, Russ, I didn't even tell you this part, but let's start right here and do this. Tell people what's the best way to get in touch with you. How can they do that?
The best place is to go to www.bacc.cc. And all of the questions and all of the comments or needs that people have, you put it there. And then we are able to sort through it right here at our office. And I'm pretty easy to reach that way. But most importantly, we can specifically tie people or connect people with whoever they might want to reach or whatever kind of content they might want to receive.
Catch us up to date then, Russ. What is your and Gail's story?
You know, we have a story that is not unlike your own in a sense that, and you know, here on the your podcast, the first thing I notice is youth worker and then on fire, and I got excited just seeing that and motivated seeing that. I think passion for what you do is really important. My wife and I have been doing ministry for a long time. Like you said, we've been here for about 30 years. But when we were in Washington, D.C., we had our first son, and he was born with Down syndrome. We were in the delivery room and did not know. The attending pediatrician looked up at us and said, "You do know your child has Down syndrome," and we did not know that. And so at the same time, we were building a ministry. We've always been interested in and focused on developing the future. And so we work with teenagers, we work with campus students in D.C. We came here, we built the same. And so when we had a son with special needs, the doctor who talked to me pulled me aside and said, "Russ, we don't know each other." He was the head of genetics at Washington, D.C. Children's Hospital. He said, "I want you to understand 2 things before we get into much about your son's Down syndrome. You first have a son. Second, he happens to have Down syndrome." That set the tone for how we would build our ministry, which is not focused as singularly or solely or even primarily on special needs, because we build an inclusive ministry, which is about bringing people with special needs, both children, middle schoolers, teenagers, and adults, along with everyone else. So there's not a separation. There's not a let's go find a program we can put these kids in and then they can be taken care of someplace and then everybody leaves and goes to the neurotypical place. We actually bring everybody together in everything from children's ministry to our teen ministry to our campus ministry to our family ministries. And so once we had our son, we had to figure out things. This was some time ago because I'm older. We had to figure out, well, what do we do? How do we build programs? And we happened to move to Silicon Valley from DC. And we moved obviously into one of the most, if not the most innovative place on the planet. And when we got here, it really opened my eyes, and it's a longer story, to just how innovative we could be. And it was from there that we developed things like a children's ministry called Spiritual Resource Ministry, which you have neurotypical kids, they're involved in it, along with special needs kids. And people are educated about how to interact with and include special needs kids. And all over our church, in our 8 different locations, each one of them has a spiritual resource ministry. And the manual was developed from that. But building that ministry has turned into everything from inclusive Easter egg hunts, where we have people in the community that don't believe in God. They may be Hindu, they may be Buddhist, they may be atheist, but they still come because their kids and their families can be included. We have e-hoops, we have e-soccer, all these different things, and all of them are inclusive. But it began with that first germ of God saying, hey, you have a special needs kid, and now I've got an adventure for you to live. And I'm not saying that it doesn't come without challenges, but what it is, as you know from your own experience and your own path, Doug, that when God puts us on a path, it's a path that will lead to more people having an opportunity to know God and experience a relationship with Him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who should consider this ministry then? Now, here we are. This is your story, but who should consider it and who should not consider it? Is there both sides to that?
I'll start with who should not consider it, because I'm going to tie into the youth ministry, because one of the things that was really important when my son got to be teenage years, my oldest son, he had a tremendous number of friends who were neurotypical, and a lot of them weren't interested in God. And so I said, wow, I've got to figure out how in the world am I going to help my son develop a faith in God, have a relationship with God, if none of his friends will do that. And so I created a group that was a teen group just for them. I called it Double Edge, how the Bible is double edge. And it was a time of discussion, a time of fun, a time of development, interaction, challenge. And out of that group of 8, all of them ended up becoming Christians. Now, why do I say that? To answer the question of who should consider the ministry. Every ministry we do, when we serve those who are in need, or serve those who are oppressed, or serve those who are poor, it opens a door to show people that we want to do good. And I think that we have a decline in church attendance. We have the fastest growing group still in America is the religious nuns, NONES, who look at all the churches, denominations, non-denominations, and say, I want to have nothing to do with any of them. And a lot of that's because, and it's primarily, Gen Z, millennials, a lot of that is because I think that when they look at churches, they have a definition of God that they assume. I'm not saying it's all true, but they assume. But when they can see us doing good, it really changes changes the view people have of God. And so when I answer the question of who should not consider it, I think everyone should consider it, because it's a way to do good that isn't that challenging if you start small like we did. And so the people who should consider it right away are those with people who have special needs families in their churches, or special needs kids in their churches, or are in a community where they know there is a group or a population of special needs people that are in need of opportunities to have relationships, opportunities to have fun. So that's one group. Another group are those that are, quite frankly, looking for something good and powerful to do in their community that demonstrates that they're not just about, church themselves, they're also about the community. And so I think it's an opportunity for everybody to expand the reach they have. Not just when we practice doing good in our church, we don't care if you go to church or you believe in God or whatever. We just want to do good. And I think that's how Jesus was. When Jesus went out and was healing, he didn't check with each individual person to make sure that they were going to be a committed follower of his. He went out and did the good. And the good he did, it grew the crowds, because people were interested when someone's doing something that's not just about themselves. And so it's a powerful ministry, and it's especially good. I'll add this because we're on the awesome Youth Worker on Fire podcast. It's especially good for teenagers and middle schoolers. That's where we made our bread and butter as far as helping people. The teenagers and middle schoolers became coaches for the special needs kids. And they ended up a number of them ended up going into sports themselves in interscholastic sports. And I've got tons of stories about that. And so it's a great way to invigorate your teen ministry or your middle school ministry by giving them a sense of purpose and being able to immediately see that they can help people. And it develops people, it develops in individuals that are young, early in their life, a great deal of empathy, a great deal of unselfishness, and seeing the power of that. And it bonds them together, for life. I just had, my son was just in another wedding this weekend with one of the kids who came up in the E programs and the spiritual resource ministry programs.
That's a great answer on many, many levels there. And you're right. What happens with students in fact, I was listening to a business podcast. I listen to all kinds of different podcasts occasionally for myself personally, as well as spiritual podcasts. But the one thing they said was, and I've said this about students, between the ages, and he said it even younger than I said it, 9 and 10 years old, students are deciding what they're going to be for life at 9 and 10. And I've always said what you're thinking about in middle school, not always, but after I've been in for quite a few years, what you're thinking about in middle school is usually what you need to be if somebody doesn't talk you out of it. And so the things that you're doing, and you're talking about infusing middle schoolers and high schoolers, and when we started doing mission trips to third world countries, middle school separate, we do this trip separate. I believe in separation because middle schoolers have middle school needs, high schoolers have high school needs, college have college needs, although college and middle school is about the same. But anyway, we laugh about that. But we took them on different mission trips, and they rose to the challenge. They were put in very difficult and hard situations. And what you're talking about is something that can happen in our own backyard. That is a major, major, major missions that very few people even know what to do or how to do, and not sure that they're willing to do.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what I love about what you're talking about is that, one, when people have an opportunity, and I've been involved in this kind of thing as well, when young people have an opportunity to go to the third world and they see how other people live and they see what service is, and also they see what's valuable. I remember being in Cambodia and discovering the power of an American dollar, just one of them. And when you see that an American dollar can take care of someone for weeks, it humbles you about how fortunate anyone is to live here, but it also humbles us in how much we have to give. Well, like you just said, the people who have special needs, adults and children, and especially families, because a lot of times they end up isolated in their communities because they're not sure if anybody out there will accept them or include them if their kid doesn't operate in a particular way or behave in a particular way or fit in a particular way. And we've seen just tremendous stories here in our church of not just special needs families being helped, but typical kids being transformed. We've seen kids who were not interested in God or not interested in really any kind of relationship with Christians be able to change their disposition because their cynicism was based on the fact that what they felt was self-righteous and judgmental of people and even hypocritical. But when they got involved in these activities and saw the sincerity and authenticity of people who were living the walk, not just talking, it really made an impact on them. And I'm not saying that we don't do it because we're like, oh yeah, that way the kids will all become Christians and believe in God. We do it because we should do good. That's how we're a light to the world around us. And I know that's what you're talking about as well.
Yeah, and I'll reemphasize, I'm going to state what you said just because I think I hear what you're saying, and that is we just need to do good. We just need to love people, and we need to meet the needs where they are. We do it in business, but in ministry, we don't always do that. What makes a good business? Well, you find out what the needs are, and then you meet that need, and that becomes a good business. And what do we do in Christianity? Well, you find out what the needs of the people are, and you go and you meet those needs. And then there might be an opportunity to talk about Jesus.
Yeah, 100%.
But you don't do it on purpose. You don't go out there and go, okay, this is the reason. Even though many, I have, and others have done that in ministry. Okay, we're going to do this so that. But Jesus, I think you're right, went many times going, listen, we're just going to be who we are supposed to be. You're going to see that, and you're going to see that people want to know who we are. They want to know, not because we're forcing it, but because we're simply meeting them where their pain is.
Yes, I agree. And one of the things that you do a lot of is you expand people's worldview. And I think that part of what we have to do constantly, and you mentioned business, and that's one of my favorite things. I have a startup that I began to develop software. And one of the pieces of software we created was to help people like my autistic son who are verbally challenged, and it allows them to communicate. But I've been in spoken at and been involved with companies all throughout Silicon Valley doing this because they were very interested in the social side of trying to help the community, given that they were making billions of dollars as companies. And I think that they understand that not everybody buys a computer or uses a piece of software because it's the best. They identify with the brand. And if that brand says, I care about people or I care about the environment, they're more likely to look at it and say, hey, that's worth another look. And what I meant by the worldview is sometimes, and I think this is something that I assume you're known for because I know about it, is getting beyond the walls of the church and saying, wait a minute, we've got to expand this thing, because I think people are a lot more open to God and to faith than it appears. There's a confusion, and I don't think Christians are to blame, but I think a lot of times we're judged and blamed. But there's a confusion between who God is and what the church appears to be. It's why I wrote this book, He's Not Who You Think He Is, because I think, as A.W. Tozer says, the most important thing about people is their view of God. And so the big challenge we have is not getting people to church, it's getting them to see God in the right light. And that's what I feel. And I was an atheist and an agnostic, didn't believe in anything. In high school, I went to One Young Life. It's a long story or a short story, but I won't get into it. But I went to One Young Life, and I was like, yeah, no, I went because of money and because we could win money. And then I was like, yeah, I'm not going to have anything to do with that. That's for sure. But I think it introduced me. It made me, one of my friends got me to go. It introduced me, and it made me look at things. And all the people in that group were friends I had in high school. And the beautiful thing is there were all-state athletes in there that were my friends. There were people that were everything from cheerleaders to band leaders to everything else. They were doing some significant things in their life, so I expected them, but didn't want to have anything to do with God. But eventually, it had an impact. And I just would encourage everybody out there, number one, just since we're on the, on your podcast, Youth Worker on Fire podcast, never, ever, ever underestimate youth in your church. And one of the things my wife and I do, we have 8 different locations, but we are part of the group that is the youngest per capita group. We join that group. And one, to train and to raise up and develop future leaders, but also because we want to make God attractive to the younger generations, because you and I both know in the next 10 to 20 years, they're going to be the most dominant influence in not only church, but in the country. And so you want to make an impact on them. And I think we can, and we can do it by doing good, and we can do it by paying attention to young people and understanding them, and not always judging them as, well, they're the godless people and they don't want to do it. And I don't think all that stuff that's out there is all true when you're in the trenches with them, as you are.
No, it's not. They are looking for authenticity. Seth Godin said something, I don't know if you know who Seth is, but a lot of people do. And in an interview with him, he says, well, you don't always want to be authentic. He said, because people sometimes want you to show up and be on your best behavior. And I thought, wow, that is so good. That is so profound. And so they are looking for authenticity, but they're also looking for people that are going to show up whether times are good or bad.
100%. And it's one of the things I feel is that, over these last 30 years here in our ministry, we've worked with a lot of people in Silicon Valley because that's where we are. But we also have a partnership because of our special needs work. We have a partnership that we've been involved with the Golden State Warriors on autism, with the earthquakes on autism.
Oh, wow.
And the earthquakes found us. They found me on LinkedIn, and they saw that I had created eSoccer, and I won a Jefferson Award for it and got a congressional citation. So they were paying attention to that. And they were like, well, what's this all about? And then they got involved, and they've done such great things. But what they do is they bring their club players, which are essentially teenagers, and they've gotten their club players involved, not just their pros, because they want them to not just be excelling at soccer in a way that some of these kids are going to go on and be professionals and going to play at World Cup level. They not only want them to have that, they want them to have that empathy. And I think a lot of people do. They want to have that character that's involved. And I would just encourage everyone, one, to really zero in, whether, if you only have one teenager or two, that's all you need. But to really zero in on your teenagers, on your middle school. I love what you said about middle schoolers. We have a camp every year, And the beautiful thing about our teen and middle school camp, we used to do it all middle schoolers together, all teens together. Then we started to break them down by classes a little bit, so it'd be smaller, and we could meet that specific need. As you talked about, a sixth grader is very different than an eighth grader, and so on and so forth. But we have our special needs middle schoolers and teenagers come to this overnight camp, and what they get is they get a buddy, or they get two buddies, and those kids are willing to sacrifice what they might normally do at the camp to make sure that they are part of including those kids. And I'll tell you what, the impact that has on these, there are kids today that are now adults with their own children, own family. And the first thing they do with their kids is they bring them back to our programs. In fact, one of my son's friends had his first child, and every Sunday after church, he brings it started out as a baby. He's like 2 years old now. He'd bring the baby to our van to make sure he met my son, Jonathan. And then eventually it's like, okay, Jonathan got to hold him. And now his son will sit in the van with Jonathan and doesn't want to leave because it's so built into these kids to include. And I think it can really change a lot of lives. So it can change your church if you change the young people in your church, and you can change the young people in your church. You give them a sense of purpose that isn't always about, like you said, being on your best behavior, but it's being who you are authentically. And I'll tell you what, most people, the kids that I run into, they want to do good. They want to have a purpose. They want to have something happen special with their life. And we have the opportunity to give them those paths.
Well, and that's what I love about what you're doing. And by the way, when new opportunities like this for interviews come in, I send it by my son, but he and his wife jumped on this because she was a public school, middle school autism teacher for years.
Wow.
And now she got another degree, and now she works in a hospital working with special needs patients. And that's
incredible.
Yeah. And so they said, oh yeah, you've got to do this interview. This is the place to go. And this sounds awesome. I'm just thrilled at you sharing with us. And listen, I know that you've got a schedule. And by the way, tell us about the school, though. I was reading over again some of the material. And so what is the name of the school that y'all developed?
So this is the interesting thing about our Hope. It's called Hope Technology School. It's not part of the church. It's non-sectarian school.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we support, the Bay Area Christian Church supports it financially, as do a lot of organizations. But my wife is the executive director of that school, and it's an inclusive school. And you can find it at www.hopetechschool.com or .org, I think it is, and www.hopetech.school.org. But it's a school that's inclusive, which means that special needs kids are in every class. It goes from it's preschool. It's got a preschool, K through 8, and believe it or not, at the beginning of the pandemic, they were launching a high school. So they launched the high school during the pandemic, and
wow,
we had my team of, I've got a sort of team of guys I work with and software engineers, et cetera, and we had just gotten them set up to do a Chromebook pilot where they were going to all be able to have Chromebooks, and we've been able to get them from Google. It was provided by them, and everybody learned how to use it. And then the pandemic hit, and so they were all able to take those Chromebooks home, and they were able to work from home at school and do all these cool things. But it's a school that includes kids from beginning of preschool all the way to graduation with special needs. They're in the classes. It has a therapist on board, occupational therapists, speech therapists are right there. It's got adaptive physical education for the special needs kids. They've got a great team of paraeducators. If you go to the site, you'll get a look at just all that they've done. They've had delegations from Korea, from Norway, come and visit them and study them to see how they've been able to put inclusion at work without negatively affecting the school and academic progress of the typical kids. In fact, their graduates have gone on to a lot of the great schools around here and beyond, from Santa Clara to San Jose State to now that many of them are working. They've gone into the medical fields and the engineering fields. It's pretty profound school, and they try to set an example that says, hey, everyone can practice inclusion in education. and they've been featured on the news, both local and national and international.
Man, that is quite amazing. Now, you said you had 8 locations. Are you talking about the school?
No, I'm talking about the church has 8 locations.
The church has 8 locations. You have one, but with the school, it sounds like that you do not have to be in the area to be a part of the school. Is that right?
Oh, you do. The school's in Palo Alto, and so it's a Bay Area school. But what happens is that during the pandemic, we use the online stuff. But yeah, it's a local one. But what they do is they try to put together blueprints that help other schools put into effect what they've done. So I was on Twitter some years ago, and I can't remember the name because that wasn't I didn't make a note of it. But I was on Twitter some years ago, tweeting about some of the stuff I was doing with our technology that helps kids with autism be able to communicate who have verbal challenges. And a woman discovered me on there, and she happened to be helping the U.S. government in different areas put inclusion into their military-based schools. And so she's somebody who brought her group here and visited the school. So a lot of times the school, I don't work for the school and I don't make any decisions about it. I'm a fan and I cheer it on, but I'm able to watch what they do. And what people are doing is they're coming here, looking at the blueprint of what they've created and taking it other places. And even though we support it, we're also a big supporter of the fact that it's a school independent, certainly of us. We give financially to them, as do a lot of organizations. They just had a huge golf tournament for it, with a lot of companies and people in the area raising money for it, because it does so much good, not just for special needs kids, but for typical kids. It's a great school, and it's got a high graduation rate, a high college placement rate for all kids in the Bay Area. And yeah, we've had I shouldn't say we, I'm not them. They've had a tremendous number of requests. Hey, can we start one of these schools, over here? And my wife put together the secret sauce, so you have to get that culture built that allows you to pull it off, which your daughter-in-law would know all about that from all she's done, kind of culture that's required.
So that really intrigued me that she was part of that and that you are a part of that. But listen, what are some questions people should ask you about this ministry but seldom do? Is there something we're missing at all here?
One of the questions that people ask a lot is, well, what do I do if I don't know how to talk to a family with special needs? What do I do if I don't know how to work with a child with special needs? Many times people have it in their heart people have big hearts, and Christians have big hearts, but they don't always know how do I get over the hump of even being able to bring these things up. And I would say 2 things on that. One is as a parent of special needs children, I feel it's my job to educate, and I don't mean that in a condescending way, but to give people information and let them know, okay, this is what it means to have Down syndrome. This is what it means to have autism. Some people they'll be like, hey, can I say hi to your son? And sometimes special needs parents can be offended. But what is important that all special needs parents understand is sometimes people don't know what to say, but anyone who initiates to interact with your child, whether they're adult or they're a young kid, we should be excited about and facilitate that. Now, that's not easy because sometimes people are going through a lot of pain and discouragement and frustration from the obstacles involved in raising a family with special needs. But we have to remember that people who initiate, they really want to help. And so we have to educate and give them some advocacy. The thing that people can do who maybe they're looking at this, we get this question, like, well, how do I get started? Like, where do I begin? Sometimes the best way to begin is in your area. Find the Special Olympics, find go online and look in your area for a group that already serves special needs kids and volunteer. They oftentimes will have training. We do have on our eLife site some. If you look up eSoccer at our eSoccer site, you can find some training videos. But in your local area, maybe just go volunteer instead of trying to get to where we are, which we've been doing this a long time. Just go. We can't get it done in our church right now, but we can. Just like you took kids to the third world, we can take our kids to a community center or an event that is serving people with special needs and let them be involved. Because part of it is the questions that should be asked are, do we know how to interact with people with special needs? Where can we go to learn that? And a lot of times you can go join and volunteer with one of those organizations. Yeah,
that's a perfect idea, because often we like to jump and dive into things. Some of us do. Others think too long. But if you go and join someone who's already doing it, Special Olympics, something like that, then you're able to say, okay, do I fit here? Am I willing to fit here? And on a short term, and yeah, that's a great answer. It's a great answer. What are two last things you want people to remember from everything you just taught us on this episode?
The first thing that strikes me is what you shared about, in all the work and efforts, and I appreciate you having me on. I really do. Is how you selected this podcast. Well, I want people to know that it's podcasts like yours and it's families like yours who reach out and say, we want to do good, we want to help people, but also reach out and say, we want to help spread the word about a program that's going to help a lot of people. I think we need to support those. Your podcast, any podcast where you see people like you are going, I want to make sure that the youth of today and tomorrow are served in an incredible way. So to me, the first thing I'd say, your work and your family and all you're doing, that's one of the things I just highlight as, hey, that's something I want everybody to not take for granted, because it's easy to not pay attention to this area and to not want to promote it and make it known. And you've done a great service in that regard. The second thing is just for the special needs families, don't lose hope, because sometimes things can get tough, whether it's dealing with the education system, it's dealing with the health challenge. We've dealt with the education system, and sometimes we've had great situations, sometimes we didn't. Eventually, that's what led us to raise the money in Silicon Valley to start a school where we would be able to give people an experience that we felt was going to be profound and encouraging and building their family. But public school systems in the Bay Area and other places have come a long way, and they have a whole new generation of teachers like your daughter-in-law there that are really capable of helping, but there still can be pain. And I just say, for me, I spent a lot of time in 2 Corinthians 12, God's power is perfected in my weakness, to not get discouraged, to not give up. And I know for me, when I was at the wedding this past weekend of my son, going down the aisle as part of one of his friends' wedding, it's like the third or fourth wedding he's been in, and these guys have chosen him as a groomsman. And, it would be easy to exclude someone with special needs. I think the parents just need to know there are lots of people out there who want to include. They just need help, and it's going to work out. They just can't give up that hope, and we have it. And be creative, stick with it. And there's lots of great people out there that will be willing to help you.
Russ, listen, man, you've been a wealth of information, and I just appreciate you and Gail opening your life to so many others. You could have just taken care of your kids, because I'm sure that is more than enough, knowing what I know.
Yes.
But to say, you know what, this is bigger than our family. We have got something more to give. I just thank God for you. I thank you for our time here. And I thank you that you have spent 30 years. This one thing about this podcast, our target is primarily full-time youth workers and volunteers, both public school and in Christian community and private school, of course. All those areas we focus on youth pastors, because the average youth pastor over the decades has only lasted about 18 months, and I think there's reasons behind that. But there's organizations, like you said, like Young Life. I was with Youth for Christ Campus Life, and I worked with Young Life some, and Cru, Campus Crusade for Christ, which is Cru now, and FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. The list goes on and on and on of those people who have been there, that have reached people like yourself who didn't know they had even a need for God, and to bring this thing full circle to where there's people who are in extreme pain and extreme need, and now you've created a resource and your church. So I just want to say thank you for being on Youth Worker on Fire. You guys know how to get in touch with Russ and Gail now, so make sure that you do that, and volunteer somewhere where you can find out whether or not you've got a heart to do this sort of ministry, and if God's got a bigger vision for you. Russ, any last words?
Thank you for your serving and work over the many, many years. It's not lost on me. And I wish you a lot of good fortune and impact in the years to come.
Appreciate you so much. And we will talk to you. You've got my phone number. You can text me as well as my email. So anytime you want to get together and just talk, let me know.
That sounds awesome. And, I'm going to leave you with this. Go Blue, Michigan. That's all I'm
My heart's hurting a little bit. Go App State. Happy, go.
Doug, I will drop you a text. Thank you so much for having me on.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.